Big 10 Plus 4 is a member of Odd Pods Media and ASAP All Sports All Plays Network. Hello and good morning. Welcome to Big 10 Plus 4. I am Sam Sprunger. Tony Hollinsworth on the other side of the screen with me. No Dalton today.
I know, again, man, again. Yep. But at least we know he's actually working hard somewhere else. So.
Right. We play because we're saying he's taking his, taking time off, doing nothing. He's probably one of the hardest working guys I know when it comes to Big Ten sports and things like that. So please go find him, follow him on social media. He does a lot of good stuff. So, but this week we're right up on the holidays. Tony, Merry Christmas early. Happy Festivus. Not a lot of people realize that December 23rd is a holiday. For those of you who watch Seinfeld or have watched Seinfeld and really loved it, you know that Frank Costanza developed a holiday called Festivus, and I have my Festivus pull up right here next to my computer, and then I have my festive sweater on today as well. If you're watching on video, you can see my little sweater there.
Look at that.
Yeah. Still, this week is one of those weeks. We talked about it on Wednesday. We talked about it last week because it was kind of the same kind of thing, but it was a little bit, even a little more different because last week was finals week. This is just that really quiet time because nobody wants to schedule anything on Christmas Day. And of course you've got, hey, Christmas Eve, you probably shouldn't because they're a family thing. So there's not a lot happening, especially in the Big Ten leading up to the holiday. And for like a few days after, there's nothing really until the 27th when Wisconsin kicks off in their bowl game. And that's when the Big Ten kind of kicks back off after the holidays. So we've got some topics. We're going to talk about some stuff, Tony. There's never a shortage of topics that we can talk about.
Never.
We kind of mentioned last week on the Friday episode or on the Friday show that we talked about Matt Rhule being hired in at Nebraska, and we're going to cover the other two coaching changes that took place in the Big Ten up to this point. I don't know that they're done. I honestly, Tony, I think there's at least one more going to happen.
Yeah, I think so.
We can talk about that just in a minute. We're going to talk a little bit about the Pac-12 trying to survive after 2024 when the Big Ten raids them. Maybe some big basketball schools making some moves into conferences that might matter down the road. So we're going to talk about what the Big Ten could possibly do to help bolster their basketball side of sports. We all know that football drives the bus, and that's king, but you still have those things to make yourself more viable on the basketball side that could help in some ways as well. So a lot on the docket today. Plus we've got headlines. We don't have a Dalton headline today, but we're trying to power through. If you're in Big Ten country, you know that we're going through one heck of a bad snowstorm right now. What is it? Winter Storm Elliott or something. And
I didn't know it had a name.
Yeah, it officially got a name. Well, let's say it this way. I saw it officially had a name yesterday. So I'm sure it had been named. I just hadn't been paying attention. So
okay, fair enough.
If something happens to where all of a sudden I'm not here any longer, Tony, you know what happened.
Right.
Just keep on go on without me. Go on without me, Tony.
Go on without. Wait, do you want me to do you want me to let you just fall off the door, even though you could easily also be
jump on as well? Yeah. Let me go.
Okay, I'll be Rose, you be Jack, and I'll
we
just
will
let
go
you
on. I guess
I'll just let you slide into the cold, icy waters, literally, and sink with the Titanic.
I used to have a shirt when that movie came out. For one thing, I was like, ugh, I was 19, I think, when it came out, and I went to, I think it was a Spencer's Gifts or something, no free ads, and they had a shirt that said, "The boat sank, get over it." And I was like, that is totally my mentality. This is a historic event. I'm just gonna wear the I wore it. I wore it until it fell apart. The craziness was it was a white T-shirt, and I was like on it. Like I chose a white T-shirt because it was that strong of a statement. So
you're like, I need people to know, even if this gets dirty, I need people to know.
Correct. Yeah. So, okay. Well, like I said, we talked about Matt Rhule last week. That and kind of talked about what we thought about if it was a good hire, bad hire. We've got two other coaching positions that were filled already. One developed in the middle of a season. It was Paul Chryst at Wisconsin being let go after they got beat by Illinois. They were beaten pretty soundly by Illinois in Madison. And see that in and of itself is what's so confusing to me sometimes about what this season was football wise, because Purdue went into Madison and got manhandled, but then when Purdue and Illinois played, Purdue didn't manhandle them, but I didn't ever feel like they were in danger of losing that game to Illinois, and it was in Champaign. So Wisconsin, I still think that Paul Chryst, there had to be something going on that made them want to make that fire right then. But I don't understand it, because a successful coach like that, then all of a sudden kind of blindsided in the middle of the season. Okay, we're letting you go. You're done.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, they weren't hiring somebody right away, which again makes me wonder what happened that they felt they had to get rid of Paul Chryst, unless they wanted to get rid of him at the end of the season, but knew they had to give Jim Leonard a try. That might be the only thing that made me think, okay, that's what they wanted to do. Eventually turns out they didn't want Jim Leonard, and he's not coming back to Wisconsin.
No.
And which somebody's going to get one heck of a good head coach or a really good DC for a couple of years until he's ready to become the head coach of a program. So close to after the season, the last game of the season, I think Wisconsin hired Luke Fickel, and Luke Fickel has been one of those that has been a coaching candidate in so many programs hiring process. What do you think made Wisconsin the one that Luke, because he had one heck of a gig going on in Cincinnati.
Yep.
He was getting ready. I do believe they're joining the Big 12, right? They're one of the 4 teams joining the Big 12, correct?
Yep.
So that team is joining the Big 12. So like he's going into a Power 5 conference, at Cincinnati. He's coming off a playoff journey with the Bearcats. Didn't have a horrible season this year, taken into consideration. Why all of a sudden is Wisconsin the place he wants to go?
I mean, you look at him, and you got to remember back in 2011, before Ohio State hired Urban Meyer, he was the head coach. And
correct.
Now they went 6-7 with him at the helm. They went 3-5 in the Big Ten. They were 4th overall in the Big Ten conference and ended up losing a bowl to the Gators. No, they lost the Gator Bowl. Sorry. I was like, to the Gators?
Similar.
Really? So then, of course, he wanted to stay pretty close to Big Ten country, but not be officially in it. So he goes to Cincinnati, who, obviously Cincinnati has not been a powerhouse like ever, hardly. So he goes to Cincinnati. First year was kind of a mess, and then you look at it in 2018. He took a team that went 4-8 his first year to 11-2, 11-3, 9-1, 13-1, and then 9-3. So he never had more than technically 3 losses after his first year, and he went 57 of 18. So to me, I think he goes to Wisconsin because that's probably one of the better, more historically blue blood organizations that is not a total dumpster fire in, football, at least. Because, you look at Nebraska, historically, Nebraska has been great, but what has Nebraska been in the last, we'll say 10 years at least?
Mm-hmm.
They've been pretty, irrelevant, really. Like they really haven't done much in the last 10 years. And for him, if he was to move schools, what are your other options? Maybe you could probably go to a SEC team. You could have gone to Auburn. You could have gone to, what was another SEC team that fired? I feel like there was another one. I can't remember off the top of it. But anyway, you join the SEC.
It's not SEC +4, so I don't know.
I know, but nonetheless, at least if you go to Wisconsin, you're in a division, and your chances of winning a division and at least competing for your conference title are still pretty high. Whereas you go to the SEC, okay, prepare to get the snot beat out of you by Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Florida, and prepare to be sitting there, at 6-6 for pretty much ever, darn near. Maybe you'll get a lucky win here and there. So to me, to join Wisconsin, he's still pretty close to Cincinnati. He can still dip into the same recruiting pool that he was already dipping into there in the Midwest of like, hey, if you don't go to Ohio State, if you don't go to Michigan, you don't go to Penn State, you can still come to Wisconsin and you still have a viable chance to still be a starter in my program. And you don't have to worry about potentially being overshadowed by a more nationally recognized recruit that's probably going to go to Ohio State or Michigan to compete for a championship. So to me, I think it's a good move. He gets to go back to the Big Ten, which I think he wanted to do anyway. He's finally, to me, it's one of those, he took the 11-year journey, go somewhere else, kind of relearn himself, reevaluate, and then come back and say, okay, now I'm ready. And a little bit of a revenge tour. He could upset the Buckeyes, as Ryan Day put it. He's never actually played in, the Buckeyes haven't played in Madison since Ryan Day took over as the head coach. So, a little bit of a incentive for Luke Fickel to spoil the Buckeyes day. Maybe get Ryan Day fired because apparently, can't have more than a loss on the season.
Yeah, anything short of an undefeated regular season, you're going on the hot seat.
Well, at least in Michigan. But to me, I don't know. I feel like if they were to lose anybody else, it would be even worse, but not worse. I don't know.
I think he went to Wisconsin because he wants in the Big Ten. I agree with that last statement that he wanted back in the Big Ten. He coached in the Big Ten, like you said. For a full season, he went 6-7 as an Ohio State coach.
Yep.
Never was even given the chance to be the head coach. He was the interim the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Never was, and so he kind of was that rebound. After a serious relationship, you have that rebound, and then you find your soulmate.
Yep,
it's usually how it works. During relationships, not always, but you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was tired. He's not happy about the being the rebound. So what he wants to do is he wants to come into the Big Ten. He wants to stick it to anybody that doubted him. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say that is, what are the top 2 programs in the Big Ten? We know Michigan and Ohio State. Neither of those 2 positions are open.
Yeah.
If you contend that Penn State's better than Wisconsin, especially this year, you're right. James Franklin isn't going anywhere.
Right.
Shoot, even if you wanted to say Iowa over the course of the past 10 years has been better than Wisconsin, that's fine. Kurt Ferentz isn't going anywhere.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what school you go with that might be better this year or has been better in the past. None of those positions are open.
Yeah.
So what's Luke Fickel want to do when he loves the Big Ten?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, shoot, even in Cincinnati, he stuck around close to Big Ten country. He was in the heart of. So
Yeah.
he still was entrenched in what Big Ten was. He's a Big Ten guy. For some people, the roots, we talked about the roots on Wednesday, knowing where your roots are, he those mean something to him. So he wants to
Mm-hmm.
stick around. So honestly, if Ohio State was open, he'd jump at that, I think, to
Yeah.
prove that he was a better coach than what he was 11 years ago when he was there.
Yeah. And I mean, you have to think of it too. He was with Ohio State from 2002 until 2016. I mean, and they really, the only thing they ever gave him was he was the special teams coach from 2002 to 2003, the linebackers coach in 04. He was the co-defensive coordinator from 2005 to 10 and linebackers coach, was the interim HC. Then when they hired Urban Meyer, he went back to that same role of being the co-defensive coordinator and linebackers coach until he took the head coaching job.
That proves to me he still loves Ohio State.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he still wants to stick it to him.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%.
So I see this as a move of, hey, you know what? Wisconsin could be worse. It could be but here's the thing. Do you consider this move an up move? With a move towards the playoff? I mean, he was getting ready to go to the Big 12, not the Big 10. It's not the Big 10, but it's a Power 5. Your recruiting's going to improve. You're going to still have you're going to have that developed rapport with, you know, different things in Cincinnati. He was there. He was the guy.
Yep.
And was with what was it about with Madison that was like, I got to make this move? Well, and yes, money can matter. Don't get me wrong.
Well, money, and like I said, you know, he still stays close to the Big Ten, and like I said, you're still hitting the same recruiting pool. Like you're still like he can still go national, and if anything, it kind of boosts his national chances because okay, well now I'm going to a bigger Power 5 school, bigger name, known for really creating good NFL players out of Wisconsin, and like you said. Aside from going to Michigan, not going to happen unless Harbaugh takes a head coaching job in the NFL. I don't believe Ryan Day
was getting at earlier.
I know. I don't believe Ryan Day would leave Ohio State unless he gets fired.
I was going to say he'll be told to leave. I'm guessing.
James Franklin is not going to go anywhere with Penn State. He has kept Penn State relevant for years now.
He has made Penn State relevant again.
True.
Because if you're too young, Penn State used to be a blue blood that was historically a great program, had a very huge scandal inside their program that had gone for years with the assault of young men during the program, and it was kind of overlooked. And I'm not going to get too graphic, but that tells you how serious this was. I mean, it was years of it happening.
Oh yeah.
And
I remember when that got exposed.
That was that shook Penn State to its very foundation, and they were an embarrassment for a good 3 years.
Yep.
It was an embarrassment to say Penn State. And now Bill O'Brien came in, had a really good season that first year after Joe Pa was let go.
Yep.
And Bill O'Brien was there 1 year, and he left and went to Houston.
Yep.
And that brought James Franklin in from Vanderbilt. And it was still very touchy on what Penn State was at that point. And he has turned them into, at this point, and in my mind right now for the past 3 years or so, the third best program in the Big Ten.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. So yeah, it to me, Wisconsin, like I said, even when they have down years, when was the last time historically as a football team Wisconsin has been a dumpster fire?
Oh, it was the early 90s when they started to turn around because of Barry Alvarez.
Yeah. So
it's been 30 plus years.
Yeah.
Since they've been a constant dumpster fire.
Right.
Which
So
is why I'm sorry, I keep
No, you're
cutting
good.
you off.
You're good.
That's why it confuses me as to why Chris was let go in the middle of a season. Granted, it was a down season, but why in the middle? And that's why I only think that maybe it was Jim Leonard.
Maybe it was Jim Leonard, and kind of like you said, and I think I pointed it out at one point too. I don't really feel like you give a coach really a true chance then. Like if you had fired Chris at the end of last season, say, "Hey man, you're this close from getting us where we want to be, and you keep getting that close, but we're not getting over the hump. We're gonna go with another guy." And see how he does. And you could have even told Leonard, like, hey, this is probably going to be a 1-year thing. We're not promising you anything. We want to see how you do. Here's a full off season. Get what you can get as far as players go. Do what you need to do as far as staff hires, and then run with it.
I don't know that I can agree with that, simply because who in their right mind would take a full year interim and feel good about it and not feel more pressure about it? If you're in the middle of a season where you're struggling and all of a sudden it's dumped on you and they're like, hey, we want to give you a shot because you've never been a head coach. We want to give you the rest of the season. We're not going to judge you necessarily on the record. We want to see what you do in certain situations. This is your interview. That kind of, since he hadn't ever been a head coach up to that point, it was one of those that they maybe thought, well, we need to give him some sort of a trial or some sort of a way to know whether or not he's our head coach moving forward. And so, okay, what's the best way to do that? Okay, we know we're getting rid of Paul at the end of the season. We're just going to cut him now so we can put Jim in there, get him and see what he can do. And then at the end of the season, we decide whether or not he's going to be in as the head coach or if we're going to get a new one. And Fickel, honestly, I'd choose Fickel over Jim Leonard.
Oh yeah,
but it's only because Fickel's been around long enough in the coaching position that you know what you're getting.
Yeah.
With Jim Leonard, they didn't know what they were getting, and they didn't want to only throw him to an interview process at the end of the season and have no way of knowing how he reacts in game, and then what happens when they make the decision to go with Jim Leonard, and then all of a sudden Luke Fickel is still what Luke Fickel has been, and Jim Leonard busts.
Right.
I don't think Wisconsin likes making hires.
I don't either. I gotta say, because like you said, when you said that maybe they're not necessarily judging him on the record, just what can you do in key situations?
Yeah.
And like you said, what coach would potentially take like a 1-year interim? I would almost take that, because to me that would at least give me an idea as a head coach, like you said, because we more likely he's going to be a head coach again. I would rather like to have an idea the first time around of what it's like to have to do a lot of this, what it's like to really be in control. And if it is a bust, if I do screw up and they're like, hey man, you're not going to be the guy, I can look at a full season of what I did and use that instead of, hey, oh yeah, I have to clean up somebody else's mess and I have to try to get these players, refocused, get something reasserted and reestablished halfway through the season.
Honestly, though, do we know that Wisconsin was going to make that change?
Oh no, we have no
at the
idea.
Beginning of the season,
and we may never
because
know.
maybe they were not intending any of this. Paul Chryst was still their guy,
right?
And in the middle of the season, they're like, "What the heck is going on?" Or maybe Paul actually had a something happen within the organization to where all of a sudden it was like, we're not fitting anymore.
Yeah. I think maybe
so we're going to make they talked it out and we're going to make a move at the end of the season.
Yeah.
And then it got to the point where it was like, you know what? We're just going to end it now.
Yeah. I think it might have been a combination of both, because they extended Paul Chryst. So I mean, why would you pay the money only
they didn't even go through a
him?
full season after extending him?
Right. That's why I'm like, I think it was maybe a little bit of both. Maybe they're like, he's going to be the guy. And then, like you said, maybe something came up like, wait a minute, maybe we're not actually meshing and gelling the way that we want to get the boot. Time to go.
Yeah. I saw, we're running extremely long on this first quarter.
Yeah, we did.
But I saw, and we haven't even gotten to the second hiring. Yeah, I don't know. I think Luke Fickel's going to be good in Wisconsin. I just don't know what his motivation was to move from Cincinnati, where you're the king of the hill. Granted, you're going into the Big 12, but you're still you've got something established, and now you've got to move into a Big 10 where you're fighting two of the nation's best teams year in and year out most of the time.
Well,
and you're getting ready to let USC into the conference that you're going to be coaching in.
Yeah. Well, to me, I mean, you know, there comes a point where, you know, if you're a head coach, if you're, you know, any type of position like that, where you can potentially still move up. At what point do you say, you know, I've done just about all I can do here? You know, it's time for me to do something different. Now, like you said, you're going.
I wouldn't disagree with that if they were staying in in their conference. If they weren't moving to the Big 12, I would say, yeah, you're okay. I would accept that.
Right.
But there's doors and things that will open up immensely huge.
Yeah.
In the Big 12. And you know what? We're going to move the second half of this circle to next week. Yeah. So I don't know. I like Luke Fickel. I've liked him since he was at Cincinnati, or when he took the job in Cincinnati, and he's done a really good job building that program. So it's exciting to see what maybe he can do with more. If Wisconsin does anything, it offers him the pedigree argument to those recruits he's trying to get.
Yeah.
You know, we've been around for 30 years. We've been good for 30 years. We've been relevant for 30 years.
And that's what I was getting ready to say real quick, because I know we're running pretty heavy on this. You know, when you look at Big Ten schools, how many times do these, like you said, these big pedigree schools that have been relevant for, you know, the last 15 to 30 years, how many times those coaching positions ever open up? You know, very rarely. Like Iowa, unless Kirk decides to retire or leave, he ain't going anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, Ryan Day, unless he's fired, isn't going anywhere. Michigan is maybe your best shot. And again, you're going to have to be worried about Ohio State constantly. And plus, like you said, I think he still has a little bit of love for Ohio State. I don't think he would do that to Ohio State necessarily. I mean, he might, you never know. Because again, it's the position and the pedigree. So, I mean, maybe Michigan State, Indiana, Maryland, those are your kind of three teams that you might be looking at a head coaching position in the future. But again, you know, this is also going to be when you have a lot of changes coming up with USC and UCLA being added in. You still have to deal with the three big boys, at least of the Big Ten East. So, I mean, to me, this was probably going to be one of his best opportunities to go to a pedigreed program that isn't a dumpster fire, and that he can still have a good amount of success in.
Yeah. And you're right. And who am I? I honestly, it's not a big deal on whether or not what happened in Wisconsin, you know, in the grand scheme of things. I've, as a rooting interest with Purdue, my interests lie other places and other coaching moves. So we'll talk about those next week. We're going to move to the second quarter. We're going to kind of adjust what we were going to talk about. We're going to glaze upon and talk really shortly about what the Pac-12 has decided they're going to maybe attack to stay viable, and then we'll hit the halftime break. So let's go to the second quarter. Okay, so the Pac-12 did announce, I guess. Tony, you know a little bit more about this intimately, the details a little bit better than me, but the Big 12, I don't know if the conference announced or if it was just out there that the Pac-12 is going to pursue Fresno State and San Diego State to take place of the USC and UCLA when they leave. Tony, what do you think this makes the Pac-12 still viable?
I mean, I think so, because you know, we talked about how big losing the LA market really was, and how the fact of the Pac-12's TV deals coming up, nobody was really going to make much money, hardly at all, which is why USC and UCLA left. So to me, it does still make the Pac-12 viable. I know there was even potential jokes like, if the Pac-12 dissolves, and actually there were supposedly reports that if the Pac-12 dissolved, Oregon State and Washington State would move to the Mountain Western Conference, and that would become the new Pac-12 basically. Which I could see. I could see whatever teams don't go to the Big 12 would probably go to there, and it would probably be the little brother teams of the states that we all know are pretty big powerhouses. But yeah, according to not only Pac-12 Radio, but also althansports.com, San Diego State is probably the biggest number one target because they're still in the Southern California area. They've got a new stadium. It adds another California.
It wouldn't be a bad
there.
ad.
No, not at all. And then, of course, Fresno State would be the other one. Again, another California school, another, Southern California school at that. So to me, those two, that's about as good as you can get. I mean, they're still pretty relevant Group 5 schools. They're not bad. San Diego State had a good year last year. Basketball-wise, San Diego State's pretty good. Fresno State, I don't really know as much about Fresno State. On the radio, they actually interviewed a Fresno State fan. He didn't really give a good reason as to why they should take the Bulldogs, other than rawr, rawr, rawr.
It's compelling.
Right. But, I know, hard argument there. And then another team that they had mentioned, maybe potentially go after is SMU. And to me, that would probably be a smart move. SMU is one of the better Group 5 schools that is usually pretty competitive at just about everything, and it gets you into the Texas market, and you're not just kind of stuck on the West Coast.
Can I ask, before we move to the half, I'm asking you for your thoughts. Think about the schools we're talking about for this Pac-12 ad. Does it tell you what the Pac-12 expects themselves to be when they're not going after Baylor in the Dallas market? They're going after SMU. If you are a viable conference, why are you not going after viable? Not saying SMU couldn't be something, but if you're comparing Dallas markets, which one do you want more? Baylor, or do you want SMU?
Right.
And if you have the pull, you should be able to go after the one you want, not the one you've got to settle for.
Right. Well, and I'll be honest with you, to me, and there is supposedly rumors that the Pac-12 might try to poach a couple Big 12 teams here and there. To me,
it's not going to be Baylor.
No. To me, there's been more interest from Pac-12 teams wanting to go to the Big 12 than the other way around.
Which is why I bring this up.
I agree.
The Pac-12 is sitting here talking about viability and staying relevant, and you're not going after teams that are as relevant as what you say you want to be. Why aren't you going after Baylor? If you're going to, if you want to reach into Texas and you want to go after that Dallas market, why are you going after the little brother? If you're viable and you want to stay viable, go after the big one.
To me, if I'm the Pac-12, I would kind of rebrand myself to what the Big 12 has been for the last few years, as far as football wise. Up until the last 2 years, who have been the big two names that everybody automatically assumes is probably going to be in the Big 12 championship, if not, probably winning the Big 12, either Oklahoma or Texas. Now, that hasn't always been the case. They haven't always won it, but those are the two teams we always immediately assume, okay, those are the guys, Oklahoma and Texas.
Why it's a big deal. They're moving to the SEC.
Yeah. So for the Pac-12, now you've lost your two quote unquote heavyweights with USC and UCLA being revitalized. So if I'm the Pac-12, I kind of rebrand myself like the Big 12 did. I invest in Oregon, invest in Utah, invest into now Colorado, since they got Deion Sanders. They may or may not be relevant again. Invest in Washington, invest in the teams that you've got, because you've got good teams still. Like, you could still be a relevant conference and potentially be a factor for maybe one of these Big 12 teams does want to leave. Like, hey, we won an actual shot at our conference. We're tired of having to compete with everybody else. Let's go in the Pac-12, make it a little bit easier for ourselves, because we go to the SEC, we're going to get the snot beat out of us. If we go to the Big 10, we may or may not get the snot beat out of us. So, and I Don't know if the ACC would be a factor, maybe.
Well, I
But
can tell you, we're going to talk about this some more, this topic, because there are things that the Big 12 and the Pac-12 could have done that would have made them just as viable as what the SEC, or not just as, sorry, more viable than what they will be individually.
Yes.
Against the SEC and Big Ten and the ACC, that they're not doing. That are going to weaken them, in my thoughts, down the road, and will eventually show the demise of both of the conferences, not just one of them. So let's go to the half. We'll talk about some basketball side of some expansion and things like that quickly, and then we need to jump to our headlines. So let's go to the half. You are listening to Big 10 Plus 4, hosted on Anchor and StreamYard.
I'm Richie, aka Midnight Agent Raw.
I'm Devin, aka Special Delivery Dev.
We're the Super Media Bros podcast. And each week, we give a comedically informative take on movies,
music,
television,
pro wrestling,
and much more. Check us out at supermediabrospodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you can listen to podcasts. Shades on.
We're off.
All right, let's jump to the third quarter. It's going to be, we got some time. We can chitter-chatter a little bit about this. Piggybacking a little bit off of the football aspect of expansion, we're going to move to the basketball side, because there are stories that Gonzaga is looking for a conference, a major conference to move to. For the excuse me, obviously they're only basketball when it comes to Division I sports, so they're looking for a major conference to move to be more get more exposure, make more money, obviously. And I do believe the Big East was talked about with one of them. They also were mentioned about the Big 12, I think. What are your thoughts on where Gonzaga ends up? And what does that actually do for that conference?
Yeah, so this was published on November 3rd, so just before basketball season started. They were ranked number 2 in the AP polls. They met with the Big 12 commissioner, Chris Standiford. Yeah, I think that's how you say his name. Met with the Big 12 commissioner, Brett Yormick, to potentially talk about joining the Big 12. And of course, they met with the Big East, and they met with the Pac-12. I think it would be a good move for Gonzaga, because you're in the WCC, you're in the West Coast Conference. Tell me the last time, other than Gonzaga, the West Coast Conference has been remotely relevant in like anything. There's a lot of silence, so can't.
Yeah, I think was Fresno State in the Western, or were they in the WAC when they won the College World Series a few years back?
I know BYU is in the WCC until they have
went
moved.
Independent,
right? And then they went independent, and now they're going into the Big 12.
Big 12.
So they don't have to worry as much. What was it? What was the university again?
Fresno State won the College World Series in 15 or 16, I think.
Let's see.
Maybe 17.
Fresno State is a former member, and then they joined the MWC, and they left in 1957. So no, they were not
Mountain West. They were in the Mountain West. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So to me, when you look at that, Gonzaga can go and just beat everybody in their conference and whatnot, and it's no big deal. But then the question, kind of the same as we've had with the football AP conference, who have you beaten? What is your competition?
How many national titles Gonzaga have through the WCC?
Pretty sure 0.
How many finals appearances do they have in the WCC?
You would think probably more than what they got.
I believe it's just one.
I think so.
So they have underperformed once they hit the big stage. I think that's their big thing, is they're going to get a bigger payday when they move.
Yep.
Bar none conference.
Oh yeah.
As long as they're going to a bigger conference, they're getting a better payday. Yep. But I think what it does, I think they're, at least in the aspect of trying to get going, they're looking at the Tom Izzo portion of that is who we play warming up to our conference season. Great. They went undefeated. They got housed by Baylor in the finals.
Yes.
Housed. Like it wasn't even a game after about 4 minutes of play in that national championship game.
Yeah.
They were down 19 before like the second media timeout. Like they were just overmatched. Granted, Baylor was playing great that day or that tournament, but still the fact remains is they were undefeated. Like they were undefeated. They were the heads-on favorite to win the title, and they got housed. So like I think when it comes to the fact of let's get better competition, let's make us more battle tested and ready to play 6 games in March and April to win that national championship.
Yeah. And that's my thought. That's why I say, to me, I say go to the Big 12, because you think about it, what, 2 of the last 3 national champions have come from the Big 12 with Baylor and Kansas.
Last 2.
Yeah, last 2. So, I mean, if I'm them, I go to the Big 12. It's still a good region. You're still close. It's competitive. If you go to the Big East, you still have opportunities. I mean, you still have to face the likes of, UConn, Xavier, Georgetown. You still have to deal with Villanova. So I mean, you're still going to have to be pretty battle tested. I mean, they could join the Big Ten, although they weren't in talks with the Big Ten, but they were in talks with the Pac-12. And I mean, that geographically, if we were still going off of a geographical non-existent, conference border, Pac-12 would make more sense. But other really than Arizona and sometimes Oregon, there's not really a lot in the Pac-12 that I see that I'm like, ooh, yeah, that's a good basketball conference. So to me, if I'm Gonzaga, I look at the Big 12 as a bigger, more difficult challenge than I do the Big East, just to me anyway.
I think they fit best in the Big East, and it's only simply because the Big East is a really, really good basketball conference.
Yes.
When they reestablished themselves and brought schools in, I think that they reestablished themselves as that basketball conference that they originated as. Yep. And that's not to say that when Syracuse and Boston College and all those teams that have good football teams, or at least good in the aspect of Division I football teams, when they were in the Big East, that's not to say that they weren't a decent football conference, but they just didn't. They were a basketball conference. That's what they were known for. Most of their schools, all their schools had basketball, Division I basketball. Yep. So I just think that with Gonzaga being what they are, basketball only in Division I, that they would fit best there.
Yeah, I was going to say
I don't know though.
That to me would also fit, just because, like you said, the Big East now is primarily a basketball conference. It would make sense that they go to that conference because of that. Yeah. And like I said, and like we've kind of talked about, it's not like you're still going to a bad conference. You're still going to get battle tested. Like some like you said, some of the best teams in the nation come out of the Big East.
Oh, you got Villanova, Creighton.
Xavier.
You've got Xavier, UConn, St. John's. Like it's all like they're historically good, and then they're at least going to be Division I, strongly more competitive in most aspects than the WCC.
Yeah, and then the cupcake schedule that
honestly, no knock on San Francisco, who just housed Arizona State by 37.
I know, crazy, by the way. Yeah. But I mean, you look at who they faced. They faced Michigan State. The Michigan State took them down to the wire. They beat Alabama. So I mean, they can do it. But can they do it on a consistent basis? And can they do that with consistently good opponents? Yeah, Purdue.
So let's transition really quickly. We've got a few minutes that we can talk about this. Even the football conferences are going to do this. They're going to make basketball grabs.
Yep.
So that's why we didn't rule out any of the conferences for Gonzaga, because those football conferences are still going to make grabs.
Yep.
Now, I know at one point, in order to join the Big Ten, you had to have Division I, both basketball and football.
Mhm.
I don't know if they've made that change.
Mhm.
But the way I'm going to, I know when that they do have, that's why I would never say Gonzaga's going to the Big Ten, because they don't have a Division I football or football program. So I don't see it. You know, Butler, same way. They're in the Big East basketball wise, but they're division, what is it, FBS with football.
Yep.
So Georgetown, I don't even think is FBS.
I don't think so either.
They might be a Division III. I'm not sure. They may be FBS. I don't know. I really, it's not important. But what are some schools that you see that the Big Ten basketball schools that the Big Ten might go after to add to bolster their basketball side of things? Where do you see the Big Ten potentially looking for teams that would do that?
You mean besides Notre Dame?
Yeah, because Notre Dame's the golden goose, because no matter what, they're bringing in all their sports, and all of them will do something. You know, historically, Notre Dame has been good, at least at points, in both men's and really good in women's basketball. So those are two things. And Notre Dame is the outlier.
Yeah,
because they're going to bring every sport into your conference with a highlight. But what about those basketball first schools?
I mean, to me, if you really wanted a truly good basketball program, and they do technically have a football program, and they are considered currently right now as an independent, I would go after UConn. I mean, it'd be a huge blow to the only
UConn
the
should have already been in the Big Ten in my mind. When they added Rutgers, they should have added UConn.
Yeah, because and this is why I kind of think that Gonzaga would go to the Big 12 more, because I think because the commissioner of the Big 12 even said it. We're losing Texas, we're losing Oklahoma. I need to add good quality basketball schools too. And that's why they're even considering adding Gonzaga, is because they're like, hey, we can re-strengthen this whole basketball thing on top of a really good thing we've already got going. So to me, if I'm the Big Ten, because we talked about it, last time the Big Ten won a national championship, early 2000s.
No, it was 2000.
Yeah. With
the
Michigan
2000 tournament.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been 22 years since really a Big Ten
will be
team
23.
Even
if they win this year.
Right. Has even been in the big dance, much less competing for it. Now obviously Purdue has gotten close. We've seen Michigan State get close, a few times. We've seen teams get there, but
Michigan's been to the finals.
Yeah,
2
Michigan
years straight.
Yeah.
They got beat by Louisville, and then North Carolina, I think, maybe.
I think so. So, I mean, to me...
Oh, I'm sorry. No, they got beat by nobody in that game against Louisville. I forgot that was vacated, but they did lose a game against nobody that day, and then I believe it was North Carolina the next year, maybe.
Yeah. So to me, if I had to do it in this order as far as basketball schools, UConn, Butler, because again, you're in Indiana. You are. I still
think that football thing is a thing. So I don't know.
So.
I don't know. So if we're going in a perfect world with no rules, okay, that's and that's fine. In my head, I still think that there is that you have to be Division I in both. I'm not 100% positive, but I'll let you continue. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, to me, like you said, no rules barring that still being a thing, which I'm going to look up, by the way. And to me, those are probably the two better schools that, while they'll be leaving a massive basketball conference, would still be a good move. And again, make the Big Ten more relevant again when it comes to competing for a national title. Because right now it's mainly the Big East, the SEC, and the Big 12 to me, as far as competing for a national championship on the basketball side.
I think it's UConn. I honestly, and this is, you may think I'm crazy, but I think UConn, Kansas, and Baylor are the three teams that the Big Ten should try to pursue the most if you're talking basketball that moves the needle. Because if you think about it, every single one of those programs, basketball wise, has done at least something football. UConn hasn't been good lately. They are in a bowl game this year, but pretty much anybody with a 5-7 record is, or better is. But like they've been competitive. Like in my time, I've seen them beat Notre Dame, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So I mean, UConn is at least formidable in the aspect of they've got something that could work. But those three teams, I think, honestly, occasionally you'll get a really good football season from Kansas. Hey, Baylor might push to go to Indy every few years, or they may be USC's biggest rival in the West, or whatever. And UConn, hey, they just won the women's tournament for the Big Ten. Don't forget you're bringing women's basketball in with UConn as well.
Yeah.
You now have Gino Auriemma on the women's side and Tom Izzo on the men's side, like two of the biggest icons in college basketball right now on men's and women's side could be in this conference. So yeah. I think honestly, UConn would be my first big move. And then if that does, or even if it doesn't, or even if it does happen, try go after Kansas.
Yeah.
Why not? Why not? So it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see because they're not done expanding, and eventually you've got to start looking at the basketball side because you don't want March to roll around and you've got 25 teams in your conference and 4 make the tournament because they're the only ones that are any good at basketball this year. You know what I mean? You just don't want that. So let's move to the fourth quarter, Tony. I know you have headlines this week.
I do.
All right. So we move to the fourth quarter every Friday. We do our headlines. We are going to start off with the Tony Tribune. Tony, take it away.
Yeah, so this is going to be kind of a quick one / one that maybe might surprise a little bit of people. So obviously, ever since the transfer portal has become such a big thing, we have seen so many moves from so many different athletes to different programs. From the Big Ten side, we saw Graham Mertz go over into Florida. Just to give you an idea of what the Big Ten looks like so far, some kind of key names that are leaving, and this was as of Monday the 19th. Over 1,300 new players are now searching for a new home since they've jumped into the portal. So for Michigan, they're losing 2 people, as we talked about. Cade McNamara is transferring over to Iowa, as well as tight end Eric All, which is kind of surprising.
That is a little surprising, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm like, yes and no. I mean, Cade is like, I'm still a starter. I want to go start somewhere. And this team doesn't have an offense.
All is the one that.
Oh yeah, All is a big one because he was a captain, was really really good.
Was he hurt?
I
because
think
honestly, they still have at least one more game. I'm curious as to why he wasn't playing.
I think he was hurt / I think they just didn't give him as much playing time. I think.
Sorry to interrupt your headline. I just was curious about those.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. For Ohio State, because I'm really going to try to cover just some of the bigger ones. Ohio State, they've got 5 people potentially leaving. 2 safeties, Brian Shaw and safety Jalen Johnson. They're undecided. Linebacker Traja Mitchell is undecided, and then safety Yance Dunn is going to Kentucky, which is a little surprising. And for Penn State, they're losing quarterback Christian Valu, who's transferring to Pittsburgh. I don't really think that's a huge loss. Probably the backup guy, if I had to bet. Offensive line, Malik McNeil is undecided. Jeffrey Davis Jr. is undecided, which that to me is kind of big considering how good Penn State's secondary has been. They're getting a kicker from Columbia and a punter from Florida Atlantic. So Penn State special teams might be better, ? Michigan State has a lot of outgoing and no incoming so far. Oh wait, yes they do. They do have some incoming. They're getting a Wisconsin Badger and Jalen Franklin. And they're getting a running back from UConn, surprisingly enough. So this is probably the most interesting because we're going to continue to see as this moves on and keeps going, more and more of these players come in and out. So hopefully we'll see a little bit of a balance with some of these, not as good schools getting some of these big time players, especially with NIL money. They should be able to get pretty good money. But we'll definitely see though. So a little bit of a kind of odd headline, but I just wanted to point out some kind of weird transfers I saw happening.
Yeah, well, it's really a weird thing, the regularity and the amount of transfers we're seeing. That's the thing that really is incredible to me, because there's a lot happening. These guys are just up and leaving, and it's kind of an incredible thing that they go out at this high number. What was it? It was almost 1,000 people, I think.
1,300.
Okay, well over 1,000. I meant to say it was almost 1,000 within 12 hours of the portal opening. Like, it was just boom, all of a sudden there. So for the Sam Sentinel, it's a quick one. It's a real quick one because I'm still kind of pouring through like some stories about Coach Mike Leach. It's on my social media. There's a gentleman that's sharing all sorts of stories like as he gets them. So every day I'm seeing one, maybe two stories come through, and you kind of wonder about what it was that mesmerized some of us about Mike Leach. And this story was is a real quick one. Dave Emmerich, he worked with Mike Leach for about 20 years, and he said that Coach Leach turned into a walker. Like, he would walk everywhere. And if it wasn't within walking distance, he had somebody drive him. He just Dave Emmerich said he rode with him once in 1997 on the way to Vanderbilt for a game with when they were at Kentucky, and he said, never again will I ride with Coach Leach. Like, and maybe Coach Leach decided, okay, yeah, I don't. Like, when he first started at Texas Tech, or at Washington State, I'm sorry, not Texas Tech. When he started at Washington State, he lived on campus, so it made it really easy for him to walk everywhere. And there was one time that he was walking home after he was he had to move off campus, but he would still walk to campus. Well, he ended up walking through a neighborhood, and he would encounter wildlife. So like deer, just different quail, rabbits, but raccoons as well. And the story is they were walking along, and all of a sudden Mike Leach saw a raccoon trail and just took off and walked. And he followed the tracks for over half a mile.
Wow.
And Emmerich asked Coach Leach, why in the world would you track a raccoon that you have no connection to? You're not hunting it. Why? He just said, I wanted to see I was curious where that little sucker lived. And it's like, why do you care where a raccoon lives? But that was the mind of Mike Leach. And if something caught his attention and he wanted to know it, he was going to pursue it until he figured it out. And I don't know if I want to live more like that, or if it's just intriguing because not a lot of people would do that. But Coach Leach he never coached one of the teams that I had rooting interest for. He never coached in a conference that I had rooting interest in. But whenever I saw a Coach Leach team playing, I was rooting for them. And it wasn't because I didn't know it. And I didn't know it was because of Coach Leach until like just here recently in the past year or so. It's Coach Leach that I liked. It wasn't that, I hope Mississippi State upsets Alabama. It's I hope Coach Leach beats Saban.
Yeah.
And so it was just really nice to have Coach Leach in our world. So, all right, Tony, I did it to you again. Go quickly.
Okay, so you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Big Ten Plus 4. You got to spell the plus. You can't just type it. Facebook, Big Ten. You can put the plus on oddspodsmedia.com and on ASAP Live twice a week. And if you want to see us on camera in person on Spotify.
Got things going on. Merry Christmas. Enjoy whatever holiday season you spend. during this time. Please enjoy it with people that you love. So from all of us at Big 10+4, I'm Sam Sprunger. That's Tony Hollinsworth, Dalton Shetler, normally here. He's here in spirit today. So thanks so much, and we'll see you later.